I always turn my videos off and I don't know how. I don't know how it's possible. I didn't think it was possible. Hello, I'm back. How are you? Let's try again. Hello and welcome. Today, oh my God. Today we're talking about how not to approach people about how not to approach people about race. There, I have the color that I want now. I'm feeling more comfortable. Welcome if you're watching this live or in the replay. This is kind of an informal video. We're talking about how not to approach people on subjects of race. And it's interesting that I decided to talk about this today because I was just at the grocery store and I walked in. I was wearing exactly this, right? And I had my locks were like out and down. And this girl, she was white and she had straight hair and she said, "Oh, I love your locks." And I said, "Great. And thank you." And she said, I used to have them, but I got tired of that conversation. And I was like, I don't know what she's talking about. And I could feel inside me that I did not want to know what she had to say. I didn't want to know where it was going. And then she said, well, and there was no indication from me that I wanted to hear what she had to say. Okay. So she was revving herself up and she said, well, like a white girl with dreadlocks. And I was like, oh. And I just I've learned this. I've learned when somebody has they're about to dispense some of their emotion, especially if it has anything to do with race. I don't care if it's something that seems small or something that seems big. As soon as I feel that, and now I'm talking about public, right? Not with my clients. I create that space for them to do whatever they need to do. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about in the world. I generally do not want to talk to random people about their upsetness, about what they can do and what they can't do when it comes to race. So she said, I don't want to have that conversation. And people would always say that I was culturally appropriating and all this stuff. And she's waiting for me to get into this conversation. And I'm just staring at her oh, okay. Just blank face, feeling so uncomfortable. Of course, she wouldn't know that this could make me feel uncomfortable because she didn't ask consent. She didn't think about what it could be like for me being a person of color, nor does she walk that walk. She's white, right? She doesn't have a awareness, and she obviously hasn't studied about awareness about these types of how these conversations can go wrong. Because the thing was the conversation itself wasn't so wrong. It's just that as a person with dark skin, I don't know where it's going. I don't know if she's about to start opening up a trauma for me. I don't know if she's going to start saying things that are nasty. I have no idea. So I'm just waiting for it. Okay. I'm just I really hope that she just lets this off and kind of find something else to talk about. In the end, hello, I see you there. Hello, say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're coming from. Let me know how your day was. We're talking about the 5 E's. So the thing is, at the end of the conversation, she says something that's really disappointing, and it's one of the reasons I'm making this video. And it's something that that I've noticed white people do. That I've noticed some white people do, and it's one of the reasons I'm making the video. And that is just quit because you don't want to do the work. Now, I'm not saying that's all of you, okay? I'm just saying that the fact that you have that privilege to quit and then not do the work is really annoying, and I don't want to hear about it. I mean, I'd rather just not talk about it at all. So at the end of the conversation, she said, well, I just cut them off, and I just didn't want to have the conversation because I'm not allowed to talk about hair and locks and all of that. And I'm like, okay. She quit. She didn't want to dig deep. She didn't want to have a deeper conversation. She made an assumption that Black people, I guess, all think that she should not talk about it. She was talking about it to me. But it was just oh, so yeah, I'm just not allowed. I just quit. I checked out, but I will dump my emotions and my frustration about it on you. Okay, so that's the conversation I just had an hour ago. I was thinking about this video as it happened. So today we're talking about how not to approach people of color on subjects of race. And I will give you suggestions on how to approach people of color on subjects of race. I do see you in the room. Please give me a hello in the comments. It makes doing these videos so much easier. Hello, how's it going? Thumbs up. All right, so the 5 E's, okay? The first one is, and I want you to note this here, that the things I say are not rules or like blanket statements that apply to everybody. This is just a baseline understanding. Again, a baseline, a foundational understanding. You're going to find different levels of this. Different levels of this as you get into conversations and as you get into different experiences with other people. Okay, this is just a baseline understanding. I want you to just start thinking about these perspectives. Okay, also I'm going to try to make distinctions about being approached as a person of color, just as a person, you know, out on the street or just on Facebook, and when I am creating the space of I'm a practitioner and this is a person of color practitioner who talks about these subjects, there's a bit of a distinction. So I'll try to make sure that I say those things, okay? Because I know a lot of you, especially if you're following me, a lot of you either taking my courses, you're enjoying the free work I'm putting out about anti-racism from a spiritual perspective. A lot of you out there are working or in courses or reading books because you are doing the work and because you do want to work with a person of color in one way or another, whether you're just following or you know, working closely, right? So I'll try to make those distinctions because a lot of you have approached me in my inbox and have worked with me, right? Okay. Oh, thanks for the hearts and the thumbs up. I love those. Even in the replays, I love them. It makes me feel like I'm on the right track. Okay. So the first of the 5 E's on how not to approach people of color is with your emotions. Okay. Now, there are some obvious, well, maybe they're not, I guess they're not obvious. I just explained to you what it was like to be approached with somebody with their frustration about something that seems so little, like something that seems so little about her hair and what she was saying, people thought she was appropriating hair and everything, right? I feel like it's obvious that you also don't want to be approaching your people of color friends with like, I feel so bad about all the things happening to Black people, right? You don't want to be approaching, basically what you're doing is creating a space in which it's about you. Right? Now, that's different. I want to be really clear about this. I'm talking about an approach. I'm not talking about posting on your own forums. I'm not talking about the spaces that you create where you can deal, however you deal with your emotions in public or however you deal with your emotions. This video is specifically about approaching people of color. So you don't want to approach saying, I feel so bad about George Floyd. I feel so bad about what your people went through. I'm so angry for you. Right? Now, remember I said this was not a blanket statement. You might have rapport with somebody who's a person of color that you might talk like that to each other. There might be that comfort level, but generally you don't want to approach with your emotions about race. Really, that's the thing that you need to deal with on your own. Please understand that for people of color, we've been processing the oppression, the traumatic, the ancestral trauma, what it's like to live in this society and walk with darker skin. We're always processing that since before we were born. So this is something that we are on some level, have some level of expertise to something that you might just be aware of, something that you maybe have only been working on for like 5 to 10 years of your life. That's nothing compared to somebody who's been doing it for their entire life with the system built against them. So keep your emotions to yourself, to your forums, your forums, your support groups, your counseling sessions, right? Here's a distinction for me as a person of color practitioner. I'm letting you know this, not just for me, but because some of you are looking to work with person of color practitioners, and it's important to understand some of these distinctions. I don't want people to ever approach me with their feelings about race and what's going on, whether it's super happy or super sad. I don't want to talk about it with strangers unless I'm inviting it. You will see posts on my Facebook wall where I ask specifically, what do you guys think about this? We should have a conversation with it. If you scroll for years, I've been doing this. That makes sense. That I've created a space for that. What I don't want is for people to come to my inbox when George Floyd was lynched, or because their dad is racist, or because their mom is going to disown them because they stood on the front lines of the protest crying because they're being disowned by their family. Look, the emotions are real and they're valid and you should feel them, but I'm not here to carry that for you. If you want to work with me on it, though, book a session and you can cry for 2 hours if you want. We can go deep into that and figure out what you're seeking, what it is that you need healing with. So it's just a matter of like your awareness and like what you're bringing to it. Does this make sense? It's like your awareness and what you're bringing into that interaction. Okay. So okay. Another reason when it comes to emotions, before I move on, is that there's a lot of, when you start paying attention to like racism, white supremacism, when you start researching, reading books, when you start understanding history, learning the history, relearning the history, you're going to go through a lot of frustrations and anger that a lot of people of color have already gone through a process of dealing with their own trauma around it. So even when you're expressing something that you think a person of color might want to hear, like, I see it now and I understand, and this is how I feel, and it's terrible, and I'm frustrated and I'm embarrassed and all this stuff. We've already gone through a lot of the initial stages of that. We don't need to go back because now you're processing it for yourself. Here's something I'm going to say that's kind of controversial that it's important for you to know. All of your feelings as a white person about this stuff are valid. It's just that there's spaces in which to work on those things. It's not to a person of color that it's not to your person of color friend. It's not to somebody that you see in a grocery store when they're just trying to buy groceries. There are places for that. Let it be valid. There are places for you to work on it. Okay, you have to work through it. Don't let any practitioner or book say that you shouldn't have those feelings. They are real. If you look at racism from any point of view, you are probably going to feel shame. You are probably going to feel guilt. You are probably going to feel embarrassment. It doesn't matter what color you are. Okay, it's just about being in a position of power as a white person. Okay, in the structure that we're in, you're in a position of power when it comes to race. Okay, think about this. Our society is built around the white gaze. Our power positions, our gatekeeping positions are held by white people. Our white people. Our generational wealth, white people, our government, still mostly white people. It's changing now. We're seeing a lot of changes, but you have to understand the position that you're in. It's different for you to express your frustration and anger. Okay, you have to just have a different perception than somebody who is in the group of people who are marginalized expressing their stress and their anger, right? It's just different. It is just different, okay? So emotions. Number 2, education. Again, this video is about the approach to your friends who are people of color, okay? I'm not talking about like what you create on your own forums. I'm not talking about what you create in your own spaces, okay? 2, education. Don't expect people of color to educate you. It is so frustrating. It is so frustrating to be in 2021 and have people say, I don't know where to start. Now, I understand that it is overwhelming because it is 2021 and you can get all the information proving any point that you want proved. No matter how bizarre, there are a million choices for you. There's thousands of practitioners you can work with. It's hard to know what's real and what's not. But hey, this is the thing. If you really want to know about racism, if you really want to dismantle white supremacism, if you really want to make a better new world, it's not going to come easy. You're not just going to flip your fingers and cast a spell and it's just going to come. If you really care about these things, you do have to do some legwork. A lot of that work's going to be inside. A lot of that work, you see what I'm saying, is going to be about your spirit and how you're relating to these subjects and the path you take and how you deal with your own emotions and your trauma and what your ancestors have to say about it. A lot of that work is going to be within. when it comes to history, unlearning history, when it comes to bringing Black culture into your culture, when it comes to amplifying voices, when it comes to who should I work with, who is not going to work, who's not going to be good for me, that's going to take some time. It's going to take work. And it's at your fingertips right here. The biggest thing I think that is I've seen in working with white people in my Black mentor sessions for white people who are ready, which is open to you, by the way, is that a lot of you are afraid to look at or be in Black spaces, whether it's like a journal that you might be reading or learn Black history from Black people teaching it, because it's a little frightening to be in Black spaces because you're not used to it. That's some white supremacist conditioning. It doesn't mean you are a white supremacist. It means that that's some white supremacist conditioning. Fear of being in Black spaces, fear of a complete uncertainty into being immersed in person of color culture, right? And I understand there's also this thing of like, you've become aware of cultural appropriation, so you want to make sure that you're not like, being a part of that. But we're talking about your education. We're talking about you figuring out what you don't know. Here's a starting point, and it's going to help you immensely. And that is, start looking at white supremacism and racism as a condition or a disease that you have. It doesn't mean that you wake up every morning and put on a hood or burn a cross in somebody's front yard. I always say this. It just means that this culture, two of the pillars of this culture that we live here in this United States, is racism and white supremacism. It's in our society, it's in our government, it's in every industry. It's the material of the United States is white supremacism and racism. It's a condition, it's a disease that we all have. When you start to accept that, your journey in the anti-racist journey or creating equity or better new world, whatever, it's going to be so much easier. You're going to feel so much more empowered because you know what you're dealing with. When we think of it as something outside ourselves, when we think of something that I don't want to be and I want to be nice, we start thinking of it as like that over there, and that's the example of what it is over there, and that's not me, and that's not me, then we're never going to get to the root of it. Okay, so your education. Don't approach people of color to get your education unless they are offering the education, saying, hey, come get this education over here. That's what I do. Okay. What I don't like is when people come to my inbox and want me to hand them out all this answer their specific questions, this, that, and the other, when I have so many videos and so much free work, or they can come take classes, or they can book a session with me. I don't like that. But if they're coming, they're saying, hey, I'm working on this and I feel like we could work together. Can you direct me to your stuff? That's fine. All right. Do you see the distinction? It's just, I just want this like little perception shift. Okay. 3, expectations. I'm looking at my notes here because I can really, you know me at this point. I can talk for hours and hours on this stuff. Okay. 3, expectations. Expectations that people of color need to help you or fix the problem. When I was in college, I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder, and they started doing this thing at the end of every year, they would ask in all of our classes. It was the most uncomfortable situation I've ever been in. They did for the last like 2 or 3 years I was there. They'd ask in every single class. I stopped going to the last class of the year in almost all my classes because of this. They'd say they were trying to build a diversity program. But let me tell you, in almost every class, I was almost always the only person of color. And even if there are other people of color in the class, I usually was the only Black person in the class. And so they would ask these really uncomfortable questions that they needed to do with just white people, and they needed to do with us separately, but they didn't know that at the time. And so they'd ask us all these really uncomfortable questions about race, and I would have to sit and then listen. This is the end of the year. So like I'd have all my last classes on like Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So 3. So I'd have to listen to it like 6 or 7 times in the last week of school every year. Okay. I'd have to listen to white kids say, race doesn't really matter. Race doesn't affect anybody. I didn't come here to get my education. If Black people want the school to be better with race, they should just tell their friends and family to come here. And then they would ask me, because I was the only person of color in a class of 30, would you have your brothers or sisters or people of color come here? And I'd say no. And then I get attacked by the whole class. This was a repetitive thing. This was normal for a university that you paid $33,000 to go to school, a year to go to school to. Okay? So there was this expectation. This was the one common thing that I noticed every single year. There was this expectation from white people that we as people of color needed to fix the problem because we were complaining about it. Okay, now that plays out very clearly and very acutely in the way I just said, but there's also this expectation I've noticed that when when a white person approaches a person of color, there's this expectation, well, if I do it right and if I ask the right way and if this person is my friend, then I expect that they'll want to have this conversation, that they'll want to do this thing with me, that they'll want to give me props, that they'll give me the feedback. Stop with the expectations. Stop with the expectations, okay? Don't get consent. This is the thing with especially your friends, right? You might have a friend where you can talk about this stuff all the time, right? Some of you have those friends. Am I right? Some of you can talk about this stuff all the time. They're a person of color. You're having these conversations, right? But you don't know the things that they're going throughout the day or in their lifetime, or something they may have just discovered. There are things about race that I did not discover until even recently that I'm like, oh, that's why I feel this thing. Because when these people do this in this industry, I didn't realize that there's a historical racial thing, and that's why it's like waking up this like defense in me. That's why it's waking up this this fear in me, this uncomfortableness. And oh yeah, I experienced that as a childhood because I had dark skin too. And so we're going through that kind of stuff all the time. So I have friends. I'll give you an example with myself. I have friends who I can talk about with this for, till the day ends. But then I'll discover something, or I'll just be tired because of some experience I just had, like talking about why this girl was done doing any work because of the dreadlock conversation that I said earlier in the video. And that person who I normally have a conversation with, we talk about all these things all the time, I'll tell them like, I can't talk about it today. I know we normally can, but I can't talk about it. At that point in time, okay, now the friends I have now would just be like, yeah, I totally get it. Okay, fine. But I will say that I have been attacked before because I didn't want to go down that route, because that person had an expectation that I was always going to be available to them, to talk about these traumatic situations. Okay. Remember, we're talking about people of color living as marginalized people. Doesn't matter like how much personal work we do on ourselves, we still live in a white supremacist society. We still, the structure that we're in, we're in is still working against us. So we have to like reset. I have a friend who feels like he's always putting on a suit of armor, and he's well off. He has a great job. He has a great support group around him. He knows how to work on his own emotional stuff. He identifies as a Black man, and he still feels like he's wearing a suit of armor when he goes out the door, and he has to like try to figure out a way to take it off. So when he comes home, so the expectations, don't have an expectation. Don't have expectations of us and how we want to interact with you when it comes to issues of race. Yeah? Does that make sense? Okay. Consent goes a long way. I want to say that. Consent goes a long way with your person of color friends, or if you're approaching a practitioner. I want to talk about this, but I'm not sure. Is this a good place to do it? Hey, this thing happened and I want to get your opinion. I'm writing this letter to my work group, and it's about this one issue of race. Can I read it to you? Do you want to hear about it? I need advice. Let them say yes or no, and whatever answer you get, don't express your disappointment or your disappointment about it if it's an answer you don't want, right? If they say no, move on. Okay. The other expectation, and this comes with performative allyship. This comes with just sometimes just ignorance. And that is an expectation that we need to, as people of color, validate your work or congratulate you for your work or even notice that you're doing the work. That expectation is going to stop you in your tracks of doing the work, because the work of dismantling white supremacism, racism within you or in the system or your family or the community, that's your work because it's your work. It's not your work to help Black people. It's not your work to right the wrongs of the past. It's your work to create a better future, and you should want it for yourself, not just the people around. You should want it for yourself. It's your work. It's the bare minimum if you want to live in a better new world. Don't expect people to congratulate you or notice what you're doing. Stop with those expectations. It's going to disappoint you too, right? Because you will, if you go with those expectations, you will want to know why you are not getting the validation from the people you're trying to help, the people who you are maybe advocating for or speaking for. And if you don't get it, then what is your motivation to do it? You should do it because it's your work and you understand that it's your work, okay? 4, the 4 E's, okay? This is how not to approach Black people, people of color. How not to approach people of color when it comes to issues of great race. Empty promises. Oh, it's important to me. It's so important to me, and I see now, and I'm going to do something about this. We all have to be on board. I really wanted to change things in my family, in my community. Like, I cannot stand for this. I'm a mother. I cannot stand for this. The government says you will get 40 acres a mule. Okay. You have to understand, as people of color, that we see promises from white people all of the time. When we're talking about the issues of race, right? We see promises all of the time, historically, of that things are going to change and the work is going to be done and we're going to get reparations and this, that, and the other, and then get gaslighted, bamboozled, whatever you want to call it. So be very careful how you are posting or speaking or communicating what it is that you're going to do. Because it is, I try not to, whenever people say, oh, we formed a group and we're going to talk about it, or I go, okay. I don't give them anything else, because I have noticed that sometimes those things are happening. We're going to form a group. We're going to form a coalition. We're going to do something. A lot of times those things happen and they fizzle out in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, maybe a couple months. They're too busy all of a sudden to create a better new world, for a better new world where even marginalized people can have the same freedoms. They're too busy to really do anything about what's going on in their own communities, where people of color are being killed every day. There's just too much going on. I don't even know where to start anymore. Like, these people yelled at me and I made these mistakes and now I can't do it anymore. We see the promises all the time. So it's best to first change what's going on in your mind about like, I'm going to do this, and just start thinking of it as an exploration. Okay? An exploration. And baby steps. Baby steps that you can be consistent with. If you are not the person to go down to the front lines and get rubber bulleted by the police, then don't do that. That's not your way. Maybe your way is showing up to county meetings to speak on behalf of blah, blah, blah every month. Maybe that's your way. Maybe your way is educating yourself. Maybe you're an avid reader, maybe a book a month. Maybe holding a reading club with your friends, having them sign up for a commitment of 2 years at least. There's so many creative ways. Let your brain work, okay? Don't do empty promises. Let me tell you about a distinction as a person of color practitioner who talks about these things and guides people in these things. These are the empty promises that are problems for me, okay? People come to my inbox. They want to know all about my work. I direct them to my work. They come back. They tell me their whole life story, everything that's going on. That's fine, okay? They announce they want to do the work. You are my mentor. I'm going to work with you. This is going to happen. And then they disappear. When somebody says that to me, like, I really want to help them with the work, right? And so I'll say, hey, I'll, give the if they're seeking advice, I might give them advice. If they're, if they are stating like, I want to do the A, B, C, and D, and this is really important to me, and can you help me with this? And I'll say, yeah, here, I'll do the work of sending them specific links, and I'll say this is where you schedule, and then they disappear into the ether. So, what is the distinction? If they come back and say, oh, I didn't realize it's not quite feasible for me now, that's fine. There's a reason. That reason makes sense. Absolutely. I have people who cry to me on my voicemail and in my inbox. Oh, this happened with this person in this community. I don't know what to do. I need your help. And I cannot help but sending them a nice word, a kind word. And then at the end, they always promise something. And I don't know why people they always promise, I'll book a session with you. I will sign up for a class with you. Blah, blah, blah. Disappear into the ether. Right? So here's the thing. I don't have expectations of people who are coming to try to get like this free type of work from me, me holding space for them. I don't expect anything. Now, more often than not, when people do that, I just send them links. I don't get involved with whatever it is because I don't know if they're going to disappear into the ether or not. But look, if you find yourself reaching out, you see somebody that you really want to work with, it's not feasible for you or it's not the right time, then there are other ways to reciprocate. Okay? You can share a whole bunch of their posts. All right? You can direct other people to that person. But don't just disappear, because it's not just about like approaching a coach and disappearing, right? That's one thing. We're talking about a history. A long history of white people showing up, making empty promises, having conviction, and it's like Black people of color are going, okay, this is good. Like they're noticing, like they're taking responsibility, and then they get too busy. They have other things to do. It's not as important. It doesn't really affect me. All of that. That layer is there too. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments if that makes sense for you. This is the last thing. So that was empty promises. Stop making empty promises about what you're going to do about race to the world, to yourself, to people of color, to coaches and practitioners who are people of color. Stop it. Okay. Think of it as an exploration. Okay, the last thing. These are the 5 E's, how not to approach people of color. And again, these are baseline things. These are grounding things. There are so many more examples I could give. There are so many other, we could go deeply into this topic for a very long time. The 5 E's, let me review them before we get to the 5th one. Okay, you're gonna like this. Emotions, education, expectations, empty promises, and the last one is assumptions. Assumptions, which I renamed Assumptions instead of Assumptions because assumption starts with an A. So, assumptions. Don't assume that all people of color believe, walk, act, engage all the same way. We don't all think the same. We don't all have the same experiences. We don't all identify the same way. I know people who identify very, very staunchly as African American, and others who say, no, I am not, I am Black. Okay. Not all of us are okay with the N-word. So when you approach us and you have anything to say and it has to do with race, check your assumptions. Check your assumptions. Even little things, right? even little things like I tell a lot of for years I've been telling stories online on these pages about like experiences I've had that have to do with race that I'm exploring and like, sharing with you. And I remember this one time I was talking about like little kids in the preschool, and these little kids are at the age group, they're like 3 and 4. They're at the age group where they call things as they see them exactly, and we've all had that experience where like the little kid like sees a person and embarrasses their parent because they're like, that person's ugly. They just see it as they call it, right? And they're like, shush, shush, right? That person is tall. This table is hard. They call it like they see it. And one of the things that was that's always been very fascinating to me is that kids will point at skin color and say, you are black. And so my response would be like, actually, you must not know your colors. What color is this? Right. And then we go through that whole process and then like, oh, brown, they've already been programmed to decide that where they call everything what it is and how they see it, except for they've already been programmed on what we have decided in this country is blackness and the race of black. What else comes with that? Okay. That's the kind of exploration. So I told that story online, and I told it kind of like I'm telling now, I'm pretty joyful about these things. I don't do a lot of like high emotional crying, talking to you about my trauma and all that stuff online. That's not totally my style. But I was and I'm laughing. I usually laugh. That's like how I get the pressure off and like be able to keep exploring and get to the root of things. And I'm laughing as I'm telling the story. And somebody came on and had this whole long thing about, I'm so sorry for you. I can't believe this happened to you. I'm so angry for you. And I'm this for you. I'm that for you. Making all these assumptions that this experience that I was having with these kids was like this terrible, traumatic thing. And I was like, why are you making all these assumptions about how I feel in this situation? And I had the conversation with the person, but that's really important for you to bring with you as you navigate. We're talking about race, is not making assumptions about what people of color think and what they feel. Okay, you'd be surprised. There's a wide dynamic of the experience that's going on. Okay, there's so many assumptions that can be made. I have one more note on that, and I can't even read what I wrote. Oh, and I feel like this is obvious because we've been talking about this now for 40 minutes, but assuming that a person of color feels or doesn't feel a certain way about your interactions, or, and this is a big one, oftentimes as people of color, especially if we're in groups of mostly white friends, I know this is true with almost every group of friends it is true with every group of friends I've had since childhood to now, is that people make the assumption that I was not affected by racism, that I did not deal with trauma from a trauma of racism since I was a little kid, that racism didn't exist. I have a whole group of friends who think that racism did not exist in our community. And this is a big assumption that white people often make of their people of color friends, and that is that that their Black friend or their Mexican friend did not experience it because they're not talking about it to you. And I'll tell you, in every single group of friends, there is a point at which I stopped talking about it or made the decision that these people are not ones. As much as I love them to the end of time, they're not ones I'm going to talk to about this unless I'm very clear that they are ready. And even then, I'm very, very apprehensive about it. Because things happen, emotions happen. I get asked for education. People get mad at me if I don't meet the expectations, right? All the things we just talked about. So this is a big assumption that I see a lot of white people make. I've experienced it my whole life. And that is that their people of color friends are not experiencing racism, or that they're not carrying trauma or angry or have a lot of like this internal work that we're dealing with because their people of color friends are not talking about it. They're just not talking about it to you. For some of us, we don't even know that that's what's happening for us, and we discover later in life. Does that make sense? Okay, so those are the 5 E's. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for watching any part of this video. Emotions, education, expectations, empty promises, assumptions. Thank you for joining me again. you can always contact me in my DMs if you are interested in the work that I'm doing. My Black mentor sessions for white people who are ready are always open. It's a non-shaming, non-guilting space for you to be empowered and heal. It is your space where you can talk about all the things in that space, because I invite you into that space to talk about them, and we'll figure out what it is that you're seeking, and get the tools that you need for creating a better new world. And lastly, my class, Moms and Race, is open. Enrollment is open. It is filling up. We start February 21st. You're invited to join us. Early bird, 250, I think. Early bird ends on February 14th, so just in a few days here. I hope you join us. Thank you for being here in this video. Of course, comment. I will come back and answer your comments. Bless you all. Mwah. Okay, bye.